It is the last quarter of the year, and we will soon have multiple observances, one right after the other. You will be forgiven if you thought I was referring to Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas, what Urban Dictionary describes as Hallow-Thanksmas. The holiday celebrating the most wonderful time of the year, October through December. It is a time of great warmth, sharing, parties, and of great American commercialism. No, I'm actually talking about this upcoming week when, besides Dias de los Muertos, which we observed earlier this morning, we have 3 days that Catholics know as All Hallowtide. All Hallows Eve, which evolved into Halloween, comes first on Thursday, followed by All Saints' Day, then All Souls' Day on November 2nd. Catholic tradition tells us that All Hallowtide is a time to remember the dead, including martyrs, saints, and all faithful departed Christians. Although it is believed that Dia de los Muertos has indigenous Mexican or ancient Aztec roots, perhaps the fact that it is celebrated during All Hallowtide is due to the influence of Catholic missionaries. While I was growing up, I certainly remember celebrating Hallow-Thanksmas. Lost in the bustle of Halloween costume creation and the series of sugar rushes, if either All Souls' Day or All Saints' Day was on my radar, I certainly don't remember them. It may have been partially due to a Methodist suspicion of Catholic ritual. We certainly had vague rituals surrounding death and mourning that I remember, but not All Souls. So, I began wondering why these days have held such importance for so long, for so many. And why do they all seem to be at this time of the year? So first, let me share why these have traditionally happened in the autumn. Daylight hours are now fewer. While not gone, the harvest cycle is waning. Observers of the seasons and the cosmos have noticed this passage for millennia. Believed to have Celtic pagan origins, Samhain is a Gaelic festival that has been celebrated since at least the 9th century. Beginning on sunset on October 31st, it marks the end of the harvest and beginning of the so-called darker half of the year. A figurative yet palpable doorway between the season of life and the season of death. Now, as Unitarian Universalists, we acknowledge both that we are individuals with inherent dignity and worthiness, as well as acknowledging our place as part of the interdependent web of all existence. During Samhain, this dichotomy and mystery is at its most potent. This has given rise to people claiming the veil is thin during this time. The veil is where the everyday illusion of separation and the divine truth of universal interconnection comes face to face. An ephemeral time when those living and those beloved departed are felt to be especially proximate. When we partake in ritual, this veil becomes ever more transparent. We sense that universal interconnection and feel that liminal place between these worlds. And so, many cultures throughout history have celebrated rituals during this time when the veil is thin. From Ireland to Mexico to those countries influenced by Catholicism and beyond, this time of year seems to evoke a need to honor those who have passed. I found the reoccurrence of the word all in these names resonating with me. Now, our Christian Universalist ancestors would cite New Testament verses such as Luke 3:6, which reads, "And all people will see God's salvation." This to assert that, in a religious or spiritual sense, every human will eventually receive salvation. Now, while describing these events a moment ago, you may not have caught some nuance in the language I cited. I described All Hallowtide as a time to remember the dead, including martyrs, saints, and all faithful departed Christians. All Saints' Day meant to honor saints of the church, and All Souls as a day of remembrance for the faithful departed. In the Catholic Church, the faithful refers to baptized Catholics, All Souls commemorates those in purgatory, and All Saints commemorates those now in heaven. Now, reflecting the Unitarian Universalist respect for many faith traditions and the inherent worth and dignity of all, regardless of residence on the mortal or immortal plane, I would like to suggest that for us, all means all. There are no fewer than 20 UU congregations in this country with All Souls in their name. Just as the way Halloween and Christmas are observed has shifted over the years, many cultures are now using this time to remember those beloved departed without the overlays of heaven, purgatory, or even religion. So these rituals began being observed while the veil is thin. But why did so many feel the need to do so? I believe there are many reasons why it's good for us to pause to honor our departed loved ones. I'll describe just a few. We are currently midway through the series of Navigating Grief workshops we periodically offer here at the church. While these are intentionally designed for any type of significant loss in one's life, most attendees are mourning the loss of one or more loved ones. It was happenstance that Navigating Grief is happening during this time when the veil is thin and there's an ofrenda situated in the foyer. This past Tuesday, we talked about honoring our loss. When we suffer a loss, there are invariably objects that remind us of the loss and keep the loss fresh in our minds. Now, people sometimes have one of two extreme ways of dealing with this. One is described as wiping everything clean. Reactions such as moving from the home where a loved one died, or throwing out everything that reminds you of the job you lost or the death of a friend. Hoping that never seeing reminders means you will never feel the pain of loss again. The other extreme is to make a shrine of the loss. You may know of someone who has kept a bedroom or other space exactly as it was before the loss. This misplaced affection transferred from the person to the inanimate mementos prevents one from moving through the grief. Instead of removing or enshrining all objects associated with the loss, we talked on Tuesday about honoring our loss. One way to do this is to make a special place to mark the loss, keeping or displaying selected items that will remind us of stories and memories of the loved one. It makes sense to me that we not only remember a loved one soon after their passing with a memorial service, but also an annual remembrance with ritual while the veil is thin. The first helps us move through our grief, and subsequent ones help keep their memories alive for as long as we can remember them. Americans are not adept at mourning or even grieving. Our culture is uncomfortable with aging, let alone death. An erosion of cultural norms and etiquette leave it difficult for us to process death. Now, these rituals, which seem to have been polished at other times and in other cultures, have the effect of telling us what to do when we are too upset from the loss to know what to do. In many non-Western cultures, grief rituals and death ceremonies allow for long-time grieving and makes death a part of life. Also, these rituals and ceremonies gather supporters alongside those who are mourning to prevent isolation during a very difficult time. Now, we ask for you to reach out for support and let the church know either by a call or an email or by writing in the book in the foyer when you have suffered a loss. Long-term grief rituals acknowledge we need support beyond the week of the funeral. Now, it seems, we have a funeral or memorial service, then are expected to bounce back as though little has changed. I have seen several social media posts about terrible bosses demanding an employee come into work the very same day after the funeral of a close relative. Another reason I believe these annual rituals are important is that it continues to intentionally keep the memories of loved ones alive, long after the memorial service. Ernest Hemingway once said, using unsurprisingly non-inclusive language, "Every man has two deaths, when he is buried in the ground and the last time someone says his name." So in some ways, men can be immortal. I believe we're all terrified of being forgotten, unnerved thinking of the last time someone will say our name. To keep them on people's lips, the wealthy have their names chiseled onto ornate mausoleums in manicured cemeteries. The even more wealthy put their names on business towers. Before billionaires joined the space race, they would name libraries and hospital wings after themselves. On January 5th, I will give my annual sermon reflecting on the lives of those who died the previous year. I typically search for themes by looking at the best qualities of some of those who have died. I have already seen a theme emerging, a quality I plan to lift up that we might emulate. That theme is kindness. I believe that if we want our lives to have meaning, and for us to be fondly remembered well past our last breath, we should endeavor to be kind. And perhaps our third reading was correct when Naomi Shihab Nye told us, before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. We can be kind by gathering around those in mourning, just as we would want them to do for us. We can remember those who have gone before us on days like today, or really any day, just as we would want others to do for us. We might do these things that we are so loved. It will be a very long time until the last time our name is said. Amen.